Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world with self-care strategies from Chinese medicine. I'm your host, Brody Welch, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Brody Welch, and with me today is Randi Buckley. We're going to be talking about healthy boundaries for kind people. I first met Randi in a training program for entrepreneurs, kind of an online community, and it just was immediately intrigued when I found out that she has the whole focus of her work in large part is around helping people get better at enforcing boundaries. And I was just thinking, wow, how many people could benefit from that? If you've listened to the show for any length of time, you know that I'm passionate about helping people bridge the gap between what they know they need to be doing for their health and actually doing it. But when we change, everybody else has to change too. Now, like if we want to go to bed early, if we want to start eating at dinner earlier, then that's going to have an impact on the people in our lives. And a lot of times we can maybe make excuses like that's why we can't evolve, or like why we need to stay stuck, or because somebody at work isn't going to be happy if we set a boundary. And so a lot of times that's just not true. It's a limiting belief. But it can still be difficult to feel like we have the right to live in integrity with what we know to be true for ourselves. So I'm just delighted to have Randi here to talk about how we can bring boundaries build boundaries around our time and around what we need to do for ourselves in a way that doesn't make us feel like self-centered assholes. So Randi, thanks for being here today.
My pleasure. That was quite an intro. Thank you.
So I'd love to know, first of all, what got you started in this direction? Like, what did you see a need for in the world that wasn't happening? What did you feel was missing for this conversation because people talk about boundaries all the time. And I'd just love to know, first of all, from the name alone, it implies that you have a different slant on this whole subject than most. So I'd love to just hear about the origins.
Sure. So all of my work and all the coaching I do in the big umbrella is helping people find what's true for them and then doing the work to be at peace with whatever that truth is. And being able to articulate that truth. And so that takes many forms, and the boundaries work is just huge. And so really it came from, under that umbrella, it comes from two pathways. One is that I've always been really good at it. I just have been. I moved around a lot as a kid, and I was always very good at just saying, this is me and this is what we need to thrive. And it came from my sister, who was in wildly abusive relationships, where as a big sister, I just wanted to almost shake her by the shoulders, but also comfort her. And it's all the things at the time I could not say to her because it would have alienated her. But the boundaries work is actually not just for people in abusive relationships, though that's often the case. It's pretty universal. But I really found there was this need when my sister, who did not take any crap from anybody, was in these situations where she was being railroaded. And she's fine with me saying that. We've talked about that. She wants us to be healing for other people as well.
Wow, that's really powerful and makes a lot of sense, right? That first of all, you had this natural skill set around boundaries, and your sister so clearly needed them. So I can see why that could be really compelling in terms of being able to really find a voice around desperately wanting her to stand up for herself.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then you started doing that work with other people. And how about the kind people part? Because it's really, like we think about boundaries as this really young, assertive, forceful kind of thing. Like, here's my line and dare not cross it. And I'm going to, defend it. It's almost like, I think that sometimes people imagine a boundary as a border between countries, or like a line in the sand of like something like that, which can feel really forceful and very not kind. So like do you find that people who are socialized to take care of others, like women, I'm thinking particularly need this work, or that sort of what's in the way of people just naturally being able to have boundaries for themselves?
Right. Well, you could totally named it or nailed it. And that's in the name itself, is healthy boundaries for kind people. Because I find that people who identify with being kind, and even the people who write me say, I'm not really kind, but I still think that I need this. People who dislike confrontation or are caretakers or don't feel like they have many other options. The traditional boundary advice that's out there, those things that you spoke to, suck. And we're not going to use it because ultimately they feel unkind. And if
Yeah.
you're somebody who's kind and values compassion and kindness and integrity and all these things, you're not going to do something unkind or that tramples that, because that value is so strong for you. So often the traditional boundary advice makes you feel like a jerk, or it turns you into somebody you don't want to be, or you've seen somebody try to have boundaries and they look like a real ass, or
Mhm.
or you tried it once because you thought that's how it was supposed to be and it felt terrible and you feel like you never want to do it again. However, I believe there's a way to honor your boundaries and help people take on your values, kind of step into those values that actually amplifies the kindness and amplifies the values. And it is wildly effective.
Wow, philosophically, I'm so right there with you and would love to know more about these practical details about how we actually do that. Because, for example, nobody cheers when you set a boundary. If, say, you're a woman with a job and you're also the one doing all the housework, and somebody says, somebody like me as an acupuncturist or a healthcare provider is like, you're running yourself into the ground, girl. You're doing way too much. Your kids are 10 and 12. Like, can't they do some vacuuming? Can't they make their own lunch? They're just being able to recognize that actually teaching your kids to do these things for themselves is not punishment. It's actually empowering to them and helps you actually get to stop doing all the housework. And so, but it's unlikely that the family is going to greet that yay, now we have to pitch in and do more stuff. So how can we roll that out? If for people, let's just go with women who are socialized to take care of others. Let's go with you're trying to disrupt a pattern that's been in place for let's go at least a decade, and now it's time for that to end. How can you do that without being volcanic about it?
So I'm going to actually go a little work backwards on that, because I think a lot of people are really afraid what the reaction will be from others, or that others are not going to comply, or people will get mad, these types of things. So we can really mitigate people's pushback and essentially enroll them by understanding that, first of all, this is a change for them, and change might take some time. They might have some pushback, but it's about helping them understand what to do, and that'll be okay. I think people are resistant to change in other people's boundaries because they no longer know where they will stand in their life. Because right now, you kind of know where you are in somebody's life and how things work. And when that pattern is disrupted, it can be scary. You lose your footing. Kids might think, oh my gosh, I can't do all the things I want to do because my mom is making me do the dishes now. Or if it's at work, what are they going to think? But if we can help people understand, so what the change in boundaries look like, and understand that's going to take a little while for them to possibly get into the groove. Once they understand that it's not going to be this detrimental change in their life, they're usually pretty into it.
So in other words, we're going to do things differently. At first, this might be tough, but there's actually maybe a benefit in there for you somewhere.
Yeah, you can definitely see that. So I think you can definitely say that what I try to do with my clients is help them look at what somebody wants to have seen in them. And is it that they want to be seen as very independent? Is it that they're afraid that you're not going to be around anymore? And speak to that aspect. And you might not say, I see you are afraid I'm not going to be around anymore, or I see you want to be more independent, but really speak to what that concern or fear is in communicating your boundary. Because once they feel like, okay, this is going to be okay, they're much more likely to go along with it.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times the example from one of the courses that I lead is one of the first habits that we start with is eating an earlier, lighter dinner. And a lot of times it's but dinner is about connecting with other people. And what if other people don't want to eat earlier, or don't want to eat what I want to eat, which, if it's going to be more plant-based than everybody else is used to, then how do you negotiate that? And a lot of times I'll point out that there is if the real need is for connection, like
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to do that involving food at all, right? You could all take a walk together after everybody fends for themselves. You could still make dinner and people could portion off whatever ratios of different things that they want to have. So you can still be, you can eat way before everybody else in your family gets home and then like have a cup of tea when everybody else is eating or something like that. The need for connection is the important thing, but unpacking that from its usual how it gets delivered, which might be wrapped up in these other things that don't necessarily work for somebody's body who's trying to lose weight, who's trying to digest better, who's trying to get to bed earlier, like if all those things are tied in with dinner time. So really I love that sort of meet the need and speak to like the fear of like the fear behind the objection that you're saying is
Right.
like
Exactly.
that. Yeah, it's like, oh, but we're not going to have this anymore. And it's like, well, we still can meet and honor that important underlying need.
Exactly. And get that need met through other ways, exactly as you said, that underlying need. And what I find is people are so much more likely to go along with things, if not be inspired by somebody's change, when they've realized that they still have steady footing in that person's life and understand that those needs will just be met through different ways.
Absolutely. And a lot of times that requires a bit of an identity shift, right? Like that if as one person changes, it's going against how we do things, right? How we do things as a group of friends or as a family, and it can be sort of it rocks the boat at first,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like somebody quits drinking and no longer wants to go to the bar after work, or somebody decides that they're going to get up in the morning and exercise instead of meet for coffee or something like that. That there's sort of a sense of like, but that's not what we do.
Right.
And recognizing that there is that actually what you're getting is to be seen as an individual who's evolving, and that ripple effect, like it actually, like people might want to come with you on that evolutionary journey. People might actually want to plug into what you're doing. It might be
Exactly.
inspiring others.
Mm-hmm. That's very much the case.
There is a place that I see some of the people that I work with struggling
Mm-hmm.
in, that they've been socialized as caretakers, right? To put their own needs last, to maybe take care of kids or parents or employees for that matter, or clients, putting all these other people's needs first. And when they finally realize, like when they realize because of a backlog of resentment, how desperately and long overdue setting a boundary is,
Mm-hmm.
it comes out with a lot of force and heat.
Yes.
And so like there's this tension between like not stating your needs at all, or like totally overly aggressively, perhaps even unkindly,
Yes.
voicing them. And I'm curious how you help people navigate that middle ground who aren't used to setting boundaries, but to allow them to do so from a place of centeredness.
I'm laughing because in my course, what undoubtedly happens around this third or fourth week is people are like, yes, I'm going to have boundaries. I'm worthy of them. And I can see it now. I've defined boundaries in a way that makes sense for me and works for me. And then they go crazy. Just before we gotten to the articulating your boundaries module.
They jump the gun.
I usually say, hold off. Don't go for the biggest boundary in your life, first of all, but wait, because there are, as you really decide and define what you want boundaries to be for you and what those needs are, there are ways of articulating them that can amplify your kindness. And I really, first of all, believe boundaries are an act of kindness. They are essentially giving somebody an instruction manual to get the best version of us.
Here's how to relate to me.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's why when I'm working with clients or I start a new group, I call them group graces, but these are the guidelines, and we don't offer these because we're being a jerk. We're offering these so you have a great experience and you get me at my best. So there are ways you can articulate that where you're not, and don't you dare come looking for a refund,
Right, exactly.
like feeling like a jerk, and then having all this backlash, either your personal backlash, like I'm never going to do that again, or people just saying, forget it. That's not what I'm looking for. So yes. And so the key to that, I don't want to just leave you or anybody else hanging. Really, the key to that for me is really getting clear on what's important to you about this particular boundary, what the value is behind it, and then turn that value into a verb. So if the bottom line for that the reason you have this particular boundary or this thing is in support of kindness or compassion, or we'll step out of that realm a little bit, humor or anything that is important to you, that becomes the mode in which you deliver that. You deliver it with kindness. If your bottom line is respect, you offer it respectfully. Kind of the first pivot point.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Value. Yeah. And it's really, really handy, because then if you're in a situation, you're not sure what to do and you're not sure what to say, you can ask yourself, and, because I have people really identify there's a certain way we do it, but identify their values. You can turn to yourself and say, okay, what would kindness do right now? And then you do that. What would kindness say? And, I say in the course, and I found out that somebody else had said a version of this, and I was just mortified because I was like, I didn't steal it, but it was Pema Chodron. But I've been saying for years that if your kindness does not include yourself, it is incomplete. And she
absolutely does.
Exactly. So, but that's true. So when I say, what would kindness do? That also includes being kind to yourself, being kind to the situation. And it's, that question can go a lot of ways. Okay, how can I invite more kindness from this person? What would infuse or change the situation to have more kindness? So there are lots of ways you can use that particular question as a prism and get a whole variety of different possibilities.
What does the next version of you look like? The upgraded version of me gets great sleep, experiences abundant energy and flow, loves her body, and gets a ridiculous amount done from a place of centered presence. The thing is, the same habits that got you where you are aren't necessarily going to get you where you want to be, and it's tough to change habits on your own. It's so much easier to have some guidance, accountability, and supportive peers who will help you raise your bar. I want to help you off your plateau, to help you bridge the gap between knowing what you need to do to take care of yourself and actually doing those things, like dialing in a daily body-mind practice, getting enough restorative sleep, eating what your body can best digest, and moving through life at a pace that feels easeful and in integrity with your own energy. If you feel ready to step into the next version of yourself and really prioritize the essential habits of self-care necessary to step into your most thriving self, I hope you'll join me for 11 weeks to level up your life. The next round of Level Up Your Life starts in September 2017. Just after the kids are back to school, you're done with your summer travel, and you're ready to really upgrade your life, to do the fall differently, to go into the holidays stress-free. If that might be good timing for you, I'd love to hop on the phone and see if it's a good fit. Go to brodywelch.com, head to the Level Up page, and click the link to schedule. At the very least, it'll help you get clear as to where to put your energy in order to feel how you want to feel.
What about tough love, for example? Like, just as you're talking about, like, because kindness, true kindness doesn't mean enabling somebody to stay stuck. I'm thinking about like parenting challenges, for example. Like, one of the hardest things is to watch somebody you love fail.
Yes.
And that can be really hard to not swoop in and save and rescue because you as the adult know how this is going to wind up. And so so if you run that what would kindness do onto a given scenario, is it ultimately kind to have somebody fail 8th grade, or is it ultimately kind to perhaps enable them in a pattern where they're not really learning what they're supposed to be learning, but they get to stay on track, for example? Like, how do you discern what is true kindness?
Sure. And I think that's going to be an individual question. I don't think there's a universal answer for that. It has to be what's right for you, or it's not going to work, or it will feel out of alignment. And we're going for alignment because that's when your boundaries are. That's when they sing. And everything can be amplified. So if somebody, we're looking at a possible failure of 8th grade, there are kind ways you can help somebody along, but to your point, taking over for them and doing the homework and delivering it is not kind in the long run. That's not kind to their growth and to their development. So what would be kind? Maybe offering to help, maybe putting out, say, listen, I know you're having a challenge with this. How can I best help you? I'm looking at these 3 situations, putting it out there in a way that feels like it honors your kindness or invites more kindness into the situation. You might find, I'm just speculating here, but you might find that that kid is really dealing with some challenges around depression or bullying or a learning disorder. And so the kind thing would be to help that root cause. And sometimes the kind thing might be letting them fail 8th grade. It's going to be hard,
Yeah.
but then we don't want to shame them. We want to support them in ways of changing that. But we have to really look inside our hearts and say, what is kind? What's kind for me? What's kind for them? What's the situation? What will bring kindness into the situation, or whatever particular value you want to honor.
And doing so holistically, right? Because if it's ultimately going to keep you up at night, that's not kind to yourself.
Exactly.
It feels out of integrity.
So an example I often give with my clients in the course is, and it's one I think a lot of people can relate to, but say you have a friend who hasn't had a drink in 20 years and they've worked really hard with that, and it's late at night, they're at their house and you're like, that looks really good. And a lot of people feel like denying somebody something they want is rude and they don't want to do it. And I'm saying, actually, for me, the kind thing is saying, not on my watch.
Right, exactly.
Not going to happen here. And to me, that's actually an act of kindness.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, because really what you're speaking to is looking at their highest value.
Yes.
That 20 years of sobriety is clearly more important to this person than the momentary temptation of whatever it is. And so like being a good friend is really about aligning with what's truly important to them and not what's whimsical or what feels like the moment is wanting.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I couldn't agree more. It's sort of a deeper version of love because it comes from a deeper knowing.
Mm-hmm.
For people who want to get better at setting boundaries, it sounds like you alluded to in your methodology that the first step is to recognize you have a right to them.
Yes. Yes. When I'm working with folks who are feeling challenged with boundaries, we look at why that is. First of all, it usually is one of the very first things we usually stumble upon is the definition for them sounds awful. It sounds like this thing they don't want to have, or they're really convinced they can't have. And so we redefine it in a way that works for you. Beyond that, we start looking at what the beliefs are, what you've been told about these particular situations, or what your beliefs are around boundaries or whatever you end up calling it in the end. And just as a sidebar, or if somebody does not like the term boundaries, I recommend going with their term respect or redefining them as respect, because that changes a lot of situations. But it usually boils down to one of two things. And actually, then I think it boils down to one. But the first one is fear of not being liked or loved. That's some
huge.
of those things. Yeah, usually we didn't have, in a very primal level, if we weren't liked or loved by an adult when we were an infant, we weren't going to last very long.
Exactly. You're going to get kicked out of the tribe. That's not good.
Exactly. So I don't know that, if somebody's sitting too close to you in the bus that you're necessarily worried about they won't love you. But it does go back to a lot of these core beliefs or core concerns. But ultimately, even when you boil that layer away, and we're getting pretty deep, close to the core here, it comes down to feeling worthy of them.
Yeah, exactly. That is the number one piece of feedback that I got out of my Level Up Your Life course, that we had this little celebration at the end. And this is really, it's a habit changing course. So people are learning to really practice things like meditation and exercise and healthier eating and just basics, absolute basics that we all need for thriving. And that the number one thing that people said again and again in amongst the whole, like, oh yeah, I definitely lost weight. I'm definitely, I'm definitely less stressed. I definitely have more energy. But the most important thing is I finally feel like I have the right to take care of myself. And it's like, my heart just broke, it's like, oh my God, like we are this group of totally high powered, smart women. And it's like the common denominator is not feeling worthy of self-care. That brought tears to my eyes, actually.
Yeah, I bet. It goes deep. And I think sometimes we're not even aware of it. But as we start to peel back and look at the etymology of our thoughts and beliefs, it's there.
Yeah, and like uncovering those limiting beliefs and recognizing, just rooting out whatever really outdated script we might still be reading from and what still might be running the show in the background can be really key. So once we realize, okay, I do have a right to respect and I can make how people can deal with me really explicit, what's the next step in terms of putting that into practice?
Okay. And I just have to say, I meant to say pathology and I said etymology. So I just had to correct that.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah. Fellow grammar nerds unite. Yes.
Yeah, right. So really putting it into practice, start the most simple way and a really good first step is, like I said, going back to what those values are, and then really I call it concentric kindness is this method I've developed. It's a series of concentric circles, and putting yourself in the middle. And then for each layer, and so I've seen people who have 2 layers, I've seen people who have 40 layers, but depending on what they want their life to look like. Moving outward, you put your most dear values to you, you start in the middle and you work out. And then you have an outer ring, and I call that your bottom line. So you get clear on what that bottom line is, right? And so one of those, for me and for a lot of people I work with, they find that the bottom line is respect. I call that the garden gate. And then we move into lots of garden analogies. So for somebody to come into your life in a way where you're interacting with them, they have to meet the condition of that garden gate to get into the next layer. And if that condition is respect, they have to be respectful or have the potential to be respectful. Or you just talk to them over the garden gate. And what do you do there? You honor the value. You speak to them respectfully. You interact with them respectfully. You don't invite any more interaction in beyond that.
In order to get into your life in any significant way, they've got to be willing to go through the garden gate. And so as you're evaluating that, when you're just meeting somebody, or maybe you're at a job interview, or like figuring out, like, is this a long-term relationship that I want in my life in whatever way it's going to show up? First of all, like, is there a core competency on my core value?
Exactly.
Okay, great. So then if they do, they get led into the garden.
Right. And then they can go into the next layer. And because it's a garden, you design it. And these layers might change over time. You might find, you know what, I need something else here. And the idea is to plant a relationship, whatever type of relationship it is, in the soil where it can most thrive. So if we have this idea that my spouse should be right next to me in the middle of this, or my mom should be because, oh, it's so sad that it's not. Well, actually, no. We want to plant that relationship in the layer where it's most likely to thrive. So that means
that's such a cool thing. Yeah, say more about that.
So instead of these shoulds of, gosh, it's so sad that I hear this a lot about moms and partners. That's why I'm using that as an example. They should, shouldn't they be next to me? Isn't that a problem if they're not? Well, not necessarily. You've got to put them in the layer, and it probably will be fairly close to you, but the layer in that garden where the soil is such that both of you can thrive. If we're going back to that garden analogy, so I go with the soil, that the value you want that relationship to be able to meet and honor as we work our way in it's abundant, and it's just, it can grow there, it can thrive, and it might be at some point, you know what, it's ready to come in another layer, or you know what, you might have enough stuff going on in your life right now, you just have to move it out a few layers. That's not commentary on how close somebody is or how important they are in your life. That's about putting somebody where the relationship can best thrive.
I think that's really, really smart and insightful, because it really is the kind of thing, like, if we have this idea that, for example, I have to be this layer of close, that my mother and I have to relate on this level, or my partner and I the relationship has to look like this. And if it doesn't, it's a square peg, round hole situation where, like, if that's not happening, then, for example, you can love your mother, but have her trigger something in you that makes you not be who you want to be, or you could, or being constantly, coerced into going to family gatherings and functions that you don't really care about at all, but are important to her. And it's the kind of thing where, like, there's a mismatch there, but certainly there is some commonality. There is a way that you can relate in a way where maybe not everybody gets all of their needs met, but there's still a relationship there. And it's ultimately based on at least respect, if not something else as well. Is that kind of it?
Yeah, that's a lot of it. And in fact, I think they are getting a lot of their needs met right there. That might well be the case. And it's not our responsibility to meet all those needs just because we are aware of them as well. I think a lot of people take that on, like, awareness means I am responsible for that. But
right, you are in pain, therefore it is my job to fix you. No, it's not.
Exactly. So, when you were saying that, I go with a lot of imagery that comes to mind. I was picturing that I really like orchids, and around my house, the orchids will not live. This
Yeah.
is not, this room is not conducive for orchids. That doesn't mean that, gosh, it's really sucks that I can't have orchids. It just means, you know what, I need to put it in a pot, or I need to get the right soil so that it can thrive, and then it can get its needs met within that realm, and I can enjoy this relationship that blooms, that can be at its best because of where it is in proximity to you and your values.
It's such an interesting thing that you're using this garden analogy,
Mm-hmm.
because in Chinese medicine, we think about the five elements of nature as being reflected in our bodies. And we think about the earth element and the wood element would be the ones that probably at most at play when we're thinking about boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
because the wood element is the archetype is a tree or bamboo, something that needs to grow upward and outward. It needs to assert itself. It needs to move from potential to actual. It needs to move towards the sun. Not growing is not an option for a tree. It's like it's in its nature that it has to grow, but it doesn't have to grow straight up into whatever is above it. If there's like trees in the canopy, it's flexible enough to find its own path towards the sun. And it's like it can bend with the wind, but it's not derailed in its growth path. It finds some flexibility there. So that's like the assertiveness, the liver, gallbladder, and the wood element internally in Chinese medicine is about that self-expression and about that having a voice and asserting what your needs are. Here's what I need in this relationship. And the earth element is that which wants harmony all the time, that wants everybody to get along, that wants niceness, that wants lack of, just harmony. And people who often struggle, like people who are natural earth types and have that as a high value, that harmony will trump or supersede, to get away from using that verb, it will supersede the ability to assert yourself in a constructive, non-aggressive way. And so it's really kind of like too much earth, not enough wood that we think about in Chinese medicine. So we could actually even use acupoints and essential oils and qigong as ways of actually cultivating these different tendencies within us and bringing ourselves back to balance. But really, what's at the key there is, like, first it is being in touch with our root, with being in touch with our essence and valuing our essence enough to speak up for it. And that's actually water element or kidney. So just wanted to just riff on the Chinese medicine aspect of this for people out there who are interested in the energetics of life.
Cool. Yeah, my sister's an acupuncturist. I am going to follow up with that.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
Great. Randi, this has been really fascinating and awesome conversation. If people were wanting more of what you have to offer, how would they connect?
Sure. The best way is to find me through my website, which is randibuckley.com. And I spell Randi with an I. And there you'll find, I have quite a bit of writing. Actually, I have a little book people can download that always touches back to these topics on the different subjects and different essays. But I also have a brand new Healthy Boundaries for Kind People membership. And I've run the course now for about 4 or 5 years, and I'm training coaches, leaders, people who lead others, so they don't have to be a coach per se. I offer that training program for them on my methodologies, but we also have this brand new membership that the course has been, and the course is still there, but I'm offering a membership. So people who want boundary support can get it when they need it. Because I'm finding no matter where somebody is in cultivating their boundaries or nurturing their boundaries, life is like a river. Boundaries are not one and done. So we have to navigate this river, and the boundary needs are going to be changing all the time. So I want to be able to meet people there and offer personal support, advice, help people communicate what those boundaries are. So we have this new membership. It's brand new. The soft launch is August 15th, but then it's going to be indefinite. People can join anytime. It has access to most of my boundary teachings from the past, but then we're also really working in the moment.
Oh, that's so great. Like, people being part of a community that's all going in the same direction is one of the most important ways that we can ensure that we actually are going to follow through. Because you're right, boundaries are not one and done. They require maintenance over time, and if we abandon them, they don't exist anymore. Just like health stuff. So yeah, the group evolution is I think such a powerful way of going. Randi, I wanted to give you the last word. If there's anything that, any words of encouragement that you can give people out there to remind them of the importance of having respect for themselves and giving people a sense of how to best connect with them.
Remember, if this is helpful to you, it's my belief that your boundaries are your values in action. By having them, you are really taking a stand for that value in this world and shifting the world toward that value.
Beautiful. I'm going to quote you on that. Randi, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us today on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. You have good questions.
Thanks for listening today. For more episodes of A Healthy Curiosity, you can visit the iTunes store. If you appreciated today's show, please leave us a review. This helps other people to find the podcast. You could also head to brodywelch.com, where you can find free self-care resources, learn more about Chinese medicine, and let me know what you'd like to hear about on future episodes. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, be good to yourself.